I'm sitting in the waiting room of Harrison and Associates law firm when I realize I no longer recognize my own mother's voice. It's coming through the phone speaker, filtered through my father's lawyer, and it doesn't sound like the woman who raised me. It sounds like someone who has already decided I'm guilty. The lawyer, Mitchell Harrison, our family's attorney for 15 years, won't meet my eyes. "Your parents are prepared to move forward without your involvement in the distribution," he says, sliding a document across his mahogany desk. The paper is thick, expensive. The kind of paper that costs money they just sold everything to get. I don't pick it up. "How much are they giving him?" I ask. Mitchell's jaw tightens. "That's a family matter, Sarah." I know what that means, all of it. Through the glass walls of his office, I can see the Seattle skyline doing what it always does, existing without apologizing. The Space Needle stands like a monument to a city full of people who have never had to sell their family's legacy to a younger sibling who actually went to law school. I stand up. My hands don't shake. They won't shake. That's not who I am anymore. "Tell them I'll be in touch," I say. Mitchell nods, relief flickering across his face. He was never good at confrontation. He was always more comfortable watching other people's disasters unfold from behind legal documents. As I walk out of that office, my phone buzzes. It's a text from my mother. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I turn the phone face down on my steering wheel and don't look at it for an hour. 3 weeks earlier, everything looked different. I was standing in my apartment, a 2-bedroom in Fremont that I decorated slowly, carefully, on a consultant's salary that barely covered rent when my father called. His voice sounded different, lighter, like someone had lifted something heavy off his chest. "We're going to tell you something," he said. "Your mother and I this weekend, family dinner." I knew something was coming. I'd watched my father's hands shake at Sunday brunch the month before. I'd heard my mother on the phone with accountants, her voice tight in a way I'd only heard during the cancer scare in 2008. But I didn't want to assume. I never want to assume the worst in people. That's the problem with being the middle child. You're too busy trying to keep the peace to notice when the house is burning down. My older brother, the one my parents still call our lawyer, had been home from Boston for 2 weeks, just visiting, just happening to be there. He's 2 years older than me, 4 years older than our youngest brother, Michael, the golden child, the one who actually became something that had a title and letters after his name. He went to Harvard Law. I went to University of Washington for business and corporate communications, which apparently means we'll hire you to attend meetings and nod. Friday night, I drove to my parents' house in Green Lake, the place I grew up, the place where my father built his company, Hartley Manufacturing, from a garage and a dream and a dangerous willingness to work 60-hour weeks. My mother had made pot roast. I should have known then. She only makes pot roast when there's bad news. The 4 of us sat around the dining room table, my mother at one end, my father at the other, me and my brother across from each other like adversaries in a chess game I didn't know I'd entered. My father set down his fork. "We've sold the company," he said. The silence that followed was the kind that feels like it lasts for years. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, a dog barking somewhere outside, the soft clink of my mother's wine glass against the edge of her plate. "To who?" I asked. "Henderson Capital. They've been courting us for 3 years. The timing is right. Your mother and I want to retire. We want to travel. We want to stop carrying this weight." He looked at me when he said it, like he was explaining himself, like I had already accused him of something. "How much?" I asked. $14.3 million, my brother said. He'd been silent until then, just watching, just waiting. After taxes and the settlement with the previous partners, it'll net about 9.2. I looked at him. He was still using that lawyer voice, the one that makes numbers sound inevitable, like they're not decisions but conclusions, like they're not choices but facts. "And," I said. My mother set down her fork. "We're going to give it to your brother," she said. The pot roast suddenly tasted like nothing, like I was chewing on the idea of it rather than the actual meat. "What do you mean, give it to him?" "He's going to manage our investments," my father said quickly. "It makes sense. He's a lawyer, he understands. He's a real estate attorney. He does property transactions. He's never managed an investment portfolio in his life." "Sarah," my mother's voice had that warning in it. The one that says, "We've already decided, and you arguing about it only proves you're ungrateful." "What about Michael?" I asked. My younger brother had a marketing degree and a job at a tech startup. He'd already gotten the same amount they gave my older brother for law school. And yet, none of us were getting $9 million. "Michael's doing well," my father said. "He doesn't need it." "And I don't need what exactly?" The words came out quieter than I intended. That was a mistake. It made it sound like I was asking, rather than stating a fact. "This isn't about need," my older brother said. He was still eating, like this was a casual conversation about whether to get the fish or the chicken. "This is about responsible stewardship of family assets." "Stewardship," I repeated. "I have the qualifications." "You have the penis," I said. "That's the qualification." My father's face went red. "Don't be crass. Don't be medieval. That's the deal here, isn't it? The company goes to the lawyer's son. The money goes to the lawyer's son. The daughters, singular, because I'm the only one at this table, get to sit quietly and be grateful we're allowed to eat the pot roast." My mother set down her wine glass with the kind of precision that usually preceded an explosion. "You've always been dramatic about this. Ever since you were a child, you've resented the fact that your brother was older, that he had ambitions." "I had ambitions. I still have ambitions. My ambition just wasn't to let my parents pay for my entire life while I waited for them to die so I could prove I wasn't a failure." "That's not fair," my brother said. "Fair." I stood up. I could feel something hot and terrible building in my chest, the kind of feeling that makes you understand why people do things they regret. "You know what's not fair? Watching your father spend 40 years of his life building something, and then handing it to someone who took a promotion at a real estate firm because the hours were better." "I didn't know we were keeping score," he said. "We're not, you're just winning." I left the table. I left the house. I sat in my car for 20 minutes in the driveway, watching the lights in the living room through the front window, waiting for my father to come out and explain. He never did. Instead, my mother texted me 4 hours later. "You owe your brother an apology. Your father is extremely hurt. We raised you better than this." I didn't respond. I drove home and sat on my apartment floor with my back against the wall, and I made a decision. I was going to understand exactly what had happened, and I was going to fix it. The first thing I did was hire a therapist. Not because I was falling apart. I wasn't. But because I needed to talk to someone whose job was to keep secrets and ask good questions. Her name was Dr. Patricia Chen, and she worked out of a small office in Capitol Hill that smelled like lavender and expensive coffee. She had the kind of face that was impossible to read, which I later realized was the entire point. "Tell me about your relationship with your parents," she said. I did. I told her about my father's hands shaking. I told her about my mother's telephone voice with the accountants. I told her about my brother visiting for 2 weeks, just because, and then suddenly being the person designated to manage a $9 million windfall. "What do you think happened?" Dr. Chen asked. "I think my brother convinced them that I wasn't stable enough to manage money. Or I think he convinced them that he could make them more money. Or I think my mother resents me for something and used this as a weapon. Or I think my father has dementia and no one told me. Or I think..." That's a lot of theories. There are a lot of angles. She leaned back in her chair. "Tell me about your brother, not what he did, but who he is." I thought about that. "He's smart," I said finally. "Smarter than me, probably. He got A's without studying. He went to Harvard without asking for help. He became a lawyer, and everyone treated it like it was inevitable, like that was always who he was going to be." "And how did that make you feel?" Like I was the accident, I said. The second thing I did was document everything. I created a folder on my personal laptop encrypted with a password that was literally just a random string of numbers. Then I started writing down dates and facts and conversations. Not speculation, facts. Things that could be verified. Things that could be proven. May 3rd, Father called with announcement about company sale. Sounded lighter according to my notes. This suggests premeditation. If he's been lighter for weeks, the decision was made before that Friday dinner. May 7th, older brother visiting from Boston. Has been here for 2 weeks already. Started visiting more frequently starting in January. Correlation. May 9th, dinner announcement. Brother already knew the distribution plan. How? When was he told? May 10th, mother's text. You owe your brother an apology. Not, we're sorry you're upset or let's discuss this. Immediate blame assignment. Gaslighting language. I didn't sleep much that week. I was too busy thinking about what I didn't know, and there was so much I didn't know. I decided to call my father. He answered on the second ring, which meant he was alone. My mother would have made him let it go to voicemail. Hi, sweetheart, he said, and his voice was cautious, like I was a wild animal that might bite. Hi, Dad. I wanted to apologize for how I reacted at dinner. The relief in that silence was enormous. I appreciate that. I know this is difficult. I just want to understand the reasoning, from a business perspective. Why did you decide to give the money to him instead of setting up a trust or putting it in diversified investments or something? I'm not being difficult. I'm genuinely curious about the decision-making process. My father was quiet for a long moment. Your mother and I discussed it. We thought it made sense to have someone we trusted managing it. Someone who understood legal implications and tax strategy. Has he managed money before? Not personally, no, but he's a smart guy. He can learn. And you trusted him to do that without getting a second opinion, without having him talk to an actual investment advisor or accountant. Sarah, where's this going? Nowhere. I'm trying to understand if this was something you wanted or if you were persuaded. My father breathed into the phone like a man who just realized he'd walked into a trap he couldn't see the walls of. I wanted this, he said finally. Your mother and I discussed it, and we decided it was best. When did you discuss it? What? When was this conversation? Was it before or after he visited? I don't remember exactly. That's okay. It's not important. I'm just trying to understand the timeline. But it was important. It was everything. Because if my father was already showing signs of memory loss, that was one problem. If my mother had decided this without my father and was just claiming they discussed it, that was another. And if my brother had somehow orchestrated this entire thing, that was the worst problem of all. I should go, my father said. Your mother's asking about dinner. Okay, love you, Dad. Love you too, honey. He hung up, and I went back to my encrypted folder and added a note. Father's memory seems unclear about timing. Suggests either A. Early cognitive decline, B. Compartmentalization of decision-making, C. He's lying to protect someone, mother is point person, brother is beneficiary, classic triangle of manipulation. The third thing I did was call Michael. My youngest brother answered on the fourth ring, while background music that sounded like a nightclub played behind him. Hey, weird question, I said. Did Mom or Dad ever talk to you about the money before they told everyone? No, why? Just wondering if I was the only one kept in the dark. You weren't kept in the dark. You were at the dinner. Right. The dinner where they announced they were giving $9 million to someone and acting like it was a totally normal decision that didn't require any discussion. Michael went quiet. I think they were uncomfortable, he said finally. I think they knew you'd have a problem with it, and they didn't want to have to defend it before they made the final choice. Who told you that? Mom. When? Last week. I saw her at the grocery store, and she told me you were upset. She said they were trying to make a smart financial decision, and you were taking it personally. closed my eyes, taking it personally. Of course, the oldest move in the book, make it about my feelings instead of about what actually happened. Did she say why they chose him? His lawyer brain, Michael said. That's what she called it. She said he had the lawyer brain to manage it properly. He's a real estate lawyer, Michael. He does property transactions. That's not. I know, but what am I going to do? They're adults, it's their money. It was their money. Now it's his. That's the whole problem. Michael sighed. I have to go, but for what it's worth, I think it's bullshit too. I just don't think there's anything we can do about it. He was probably right, but I wasn't looking for permission to accept it. I was looking for proof that it shouldn't have happened. I spent the next 2 weeks digging into my parents' finances. Not illegally. I wasn't hacking anything, but my father had added me to some of their accounts years ago as an emergency backup. I'd never thought I'd need it. Now I was going to use it for exactly what it was designed for, understanding family finances in a crisis. I downloaded 6 months of bank statements and account activity. I tracked the conversations with Henderson Capital. I found emails that had been forwarded to me from the business account, nothing incriminating, just procedural. And then I found something interesting. On March 12th, 2 months before the dinner announcement, my father had a meeting with a lawyer. Not Mitchell Harrison, someone else, someone downtown. The charge went through his personal account and it was for a consultation. 1 hour, $600. I didn't know why he needed to consult with a lawyer about selling the company. He already had a lawyer, unless he was consulting about something else. I called the law office pretending to be my father's assistant, asking about scheduling a follow-up appointment. They told me the lawyer specialized in estate planning and family trusts. Estate planning. My breath stopped for a moment. I searched my mother's emails next. She had a Gmail account she didn't think I knew about. She used it for shopping and online book clubs. But email is email, and if she'd sent anything to my older brother about the money, it would be somewhere in there. I found exactly what I was looking for. An email chain from February. My mother's Gmail to my brother's work email. He's worried about her, my mother had written. He thinks Sarah will make poor decisions. I agree. What do you think we should do? My brother's response came 2 hours later. We should protect the principal. I'd recommend putting it in a structure where it can't be touched without legal approval for major expenditures. That's what I was thinking anyway. My mother, how much can we tell him about this plan? My brother, I'll talk to him when I visit. I think he'll be receptive if we frame it as protecting the family legacy. My mother, and Sarah, should we tell her? My brother, only after it's finalized. She's too emotional. She'll either try to stop it or she'll manipulate Dad into changing his mind. I read that email 17 times. She's too emotional. She'll manipulate Dad. I wasn't too emotional. I was realistic. I was seeing clearly what was happening and I was nomming it. I saved the email thread. I took screenshots. I printed them and put them in a folder. Then I sat on my bed and let myself cry for the first time since the dinner announcement. Not because I was emotional, because I finally understood what had happened. My brother hadn't just accepted a gift. He'd orchestrated it. He'd convinced my parents that I was unstable. He'd convinced them that protecting the money from me was protecting it from my own poor judgment. He'd stolen my inheritance while my parents helped, thinking they were protecting me. That was the moment I stopped being angry. That was the moment I became something else. Something colder, something focused, something that didn't think in terms of hurt feelings or family betrayal, but rather in terms of evidence and strategy and exposure. I gave myself exactly 3 days to process the information. Then I started planning. The first step was hearing a lawyer. Not Mitchell Harrison, he was too close to my father. Too sympathetic to my brother's agenda. I needed someone who specialized in elder law and financial exploitation. Her name was Catherine Rodriguez, and she worked out of a small firm in Belltown that had the look of people who were good at their jobs, but not interested in advertising about it. She had salt and pepper hair and reading glasses on a chain, and a way of listening that made you feel like, She'd already heard your case 100 times and knew exactly how it was going to end. I brought her the emails. I brought her the bank statements. I brought her the documentation of the meeting with the estate planning lawyer. "This is what we call undue influence," she said, adjusting her glasses to look at me directly. "Your brother creating a framework where the money is put beyond your parents' ability to access it without his legal approval, and doing so by convincing them that you're unreliable. That's textbook elder financial abuse." "Is it illegal?" I asked. "Not yet. Right now it's contractual. The money was legitimately transferred. The trust that was created appears to be legitimate, but how we got here, the manipulation, the deception, the coercion, that's the illegal part. And it might give us grounds to challenge the entire arrangement." "What do you need?" "More documentation. I need to understand the trust structure. I need to see the papers your brother had drawn up. I need to talk to your parents and understand their state of mind when this decision was made. And I need you to be very, very careful about how you proceed, because once you make a move, he'll know you're coming." "I want him to know," I said. "I want him terrified." Catherine leaned back in her chair and smiled like she'd just realized her new client was the dangerous one in this room. "Good, but not yet. Not until we're ready." I spent the next month gathering intelligence. I got copies of the trust documents. Publicly available filings gave me the basic structure. The money was placed in an irrevocable trust with my brother as trustee and my parents as beneficiaries, but with a provision that required his written consent for any distributions over $50,000. In other words, my parents had sold their company for $9 million and then signed away the ability to access most of it without their son's permission. I documented every conversation with my parents over the next 4 weeks. I was friendly. I was supportive. I asked about their retirement plans and where they wanted to travel. And I listened very carefully to the way my mother suddenly had opinions about how my brother was investing the money. "He's very smart about it," she said to me on a phone call in June. "He's diversifying, getting into index funds and bonds." "Has he shown you statements?" I asked. "Of course, he sends them monthly." "Can you access the account yourself to check on things?" My mother was quiet. "He handles that. He says it's better if I don't second-guess him. He's the professional." There it was, the moment my mother admitted that she'd given up control. "Don't you want to check on your own money?" I asked carefully. "It's not really my money anymore, is it?" He said that's the structure of how these things work. Once it's in a trust, it's not ours personally. My mother had no idea she'd been cut off from her own money. She was just accepting my brother's explanation like gospel. I documented that conversation. Then I did something riskier. I called my brother's office and asked to speak with him about a family matter. He called me back that evening. His voice sounded different on the phone, less confident, like being called by your sister was inherently threatening. "What's going on?" he asked. "I wanted to talk about the money situation," I said. "I've been thinking about it, and I realize I was being selfish. You're right that you have more experience with this kind of thing. I just wanted to tell you that." The relief in that silence was enormous. "I appreciate that, Sarah. I know this has been hard." "It has, but I'm trying to be better about it. I was wondering, could you explain the structure to me, so I understand how it's set up? I think if I understood it better, I'd feel less anxious about it." "Sure, I can email you something." "Actually, could you call me? I'm better understanding things when I hear them explained." He agreed, and 3 hours later, he walked me through the trust structure using language that was designed to sound knowledgeable, while actually being somewhat evasive about the core issue. My parents had zero control over their own money. I recorded that call. It's legal in Washington state to record conversations you're a party to without consent. I listened to the recording 17 times. His voice on that recording was the voice of someone who was very confident that he'd gotten away with something. His explanations were smooth and self-assured. He almost sounded like he actually understood what he was talking about, and if I hadn't spent weeks doing research, I might have believed him. But I had done the research. I talked to actual investment managers. I'd understood that an irrevocable trust with a single trustee controlling $50,000 distributions was not a standard investment structure. It was a control mechanism. It was a way to keep his parents dependent on him while making them think they were the ones who'd chosen to be dependent. It was genius in the most malicious way possible. By July, I had 3 boxes of documentation and a lawyer who was starting to see the shape of a case. "The question," Catherine said during one of our Friday afternoon meetings, "is what your parents want to happen. Because we could go after your brother, but what we really need is for them to acknowledge that they were manipulated. That's what makes this work." "They won't do that," I said. "They're too invested in the narrative that he's protecting them. My mother especially won't admit that she made a mistake." "Then we need to force them to see it." "How?" "We need to show them something they can't ignore. Something that proves your brother's been lying to them about how the money is being managed." I spent the next 3 weeks researching my brother's financial statements. He'd sent my mother copies of the trust account statements, investments, and diversifications, just like he'd promised. But those statements didn't add up. The returns he was claiming didn't match the market performance. The portfolio he'd described didn't match the actual holdings. I hired a forensic accountant named David Park to review the statements. He found the problem in 4 hours. "He's not actually investing this money," David said, sliding a spreadsheet across the table to me. "Or rather, he's investing some of it. But the bulk of it, I'd say 6 out of the 9 million, is sitting in a private account that shows up on the statements as diversified holdings, but is actually just cash in a money market account earning 0.03%. Why would he do that? Control, movement, access. If the money is in actual investments, there's a paper trail. Regular trading, market fluctuations, statements from brokers. But if it's just sitting in cash in a private account, he can move it wherever he wants without anyone really understanding where it went." "How do you know it's in a private account?" "Because these statements are fake," David said flatly. "They look real. They're formatted correctly, but the holdings don't correspond to anything that actually exists in the market. Your brother created fake investment statements to show your parents, while the actual money is somewhere else." I sat with that for a moment. It was worse than elder financial exploitation. It was fraud. It was criminal fraud. "Can you prove it?" I asked. "I can show that the statements don't match market data, and I can show that the numbers don't add up. But to actually prove where the money is, we'd need to see the actual bank statements and account records, which your brother controls." "Can we subpoena them?" "Not without filing a legal case first, and once we file, he'll know." I called Catherine the next morning. "We're ready," I said. "Are you sure? Once we start this, there's no going back." "I'm sure." "What does your lawyer side think about this?" I smiled. She was testing me, making sure I hadn't gone into this from an emotional place. "My lawyer side thinks that my brother has committed wire fraud and bank fraud on a scale of $6 million. My emotional side doesn't care anymore. My strategic side wants to see him in prison." "Okay then," Catherine said. "Let's make sure he gets there." The lawsuit was filed on August 18th, almost exactly 3 months after the dinner announcement. Catherine filed it as a claim of elder financial exploitation and undue influence, with a demand to examine all trust documents and financial records. The filing included the emails, the phone recordings, the forensic accounting analysis, and a declaration from me about what I'd observed. The summons arrived at my brother's office on a Tuesday. I know because he called me that night, his voice not smooth anymore. His voice sounding like it belonged to someone who just realized the ground beneath him was liquid. "What the hell are you doing?" he said. "What I should have done months ago. You're going to destroy this family. You destroyed the family when you stole $9 million from our parents and convinced them they were too incompetent to manage it themselves." "I did no such thing. I was trying to protect." "I have the emails, Marcus. I have the recordings. I have a forensic accountant who can prove you fabricated investment statements. I have your own lawyer helping me make sure you understand exactly how deep the hole you dug is." He hung up. I didn't call back. My father called the next morning. "I think you're making a mistake," he said. "I don't think I am," I replied. "Your brother is trying to help us. This lawsuit, it's going to make it look like he's done something wrong." "He has done something wrong." "Sarah." "Dad, did you ask Marcus to move $6 million into a private account instead of investing it? Did you authorize him to create fake investment statements? Did you tell him to tell you he was diversifying when he's actually just hoarding cash?" My father didn't answer. "Because I have proof that he did all of those things. And I have proof that he convinced you and Mom to give him control so that you couldn't find out what he was doing. He's your brother. He's a thief. You don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, I do. I know exactly what I'm talking about, and so does my lawyer, and so does the forensic accountant, and so is the judge who's going to read all of this and agree that you've been manipulated and defrauded by your own son." My father hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't cry. I just added it to my file and moved on. The discovery process was brutal. My brother's lawyer, not our family lawyer, but a different one, someone from a big firm who understood how to protect a guilty client, fought every request. But Catherine was better. Catherine had done this before. In late September, we got the bank statements we needed. I sat in Catherine's office and watched her face as she read them. "My God," she said quietly, "he's been moving money." "Where?" "Everywhere, a private equity fund, a cryptocurrency exchange, a real estate purchase in Portland under a shell company. This isn't just fraud, Sarah. This is money laundering." "Can we prove intent?" "Absolutely. He set up the trust specifically to give himself the legal authority to move money this way without your parents being able to stop him. That's not accidental. That's premeditated." The deposition was scheduled for October 15th. I sat in the waiting room of the courthouse at 8:45 in the morning, watching my brother arrive with his lawyer. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. His face had a grayish quality, and he was gripping his lawyer's arm like it was the only thing keeping him upright. When he saw me, his face went white. "This is going to be the worst mistake of your life," he said as he passed. I didn't respond. I just looked at him with the kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly what's going to happen next. Catherine had prepped me for every possible angle. She knew what he was going to claim and exactly how to dismantle each claim with documentation. The deposition lasted 8 hours. My brother started by claiming that the trust structure was a standard investment vehicle and that he was simply managing the money responsibly. But when Catherine showed him the fake statements, he changed his story. He claimed he'd created them to simplify reporting. When she showed him the real bank statements, he claimed the private account was a legitimate holding strategy. None of it held up. By hour 6, he was admitting that he'd moved money without my parents' specific authorization. By hour 7, he was claiming that he was planning to put it back before they retired, so no permanent harm had been done. By hour 8, his lawyer was asking for a break, and my brother was asking if we could settle. "No," Catherine said before I could open my mouth. "We're going to trial." My parents retained a different lawyer. Not because they believed my brother anymore, but because they finally understood that they'd been victimized by their own son, and they wanted legal representation that reflected that. My father called me the day he hired them. "I'm sorry," he said. I let him sit in that apology for a moment. "What are you sorry for?" I asked. "For not believing you, for not seeing what was happening, for letting your brother convince me that you were the problem when the whole time he was," my father's voice cracked. "He was stealing from us." "Yes. We gave him everything. We paid for his law school. We trusted him with our life's work." "I know. And he lied to us. He lied to your mother. He made us think we were the ones who couldn't be trusted." "He's good at that," I said. "He convinced everyone." "Except you." "Yes." My father was quiet for a long moment. "You were right," he said finally. "About all of it, I just didn't want to believe it." I'd waited 3 months for my father to say those words. I'd thought it would feel triumphant when he did. Instead, it just felt like sadness. "What happens now?" he asked. "We go to trial. My lawyer will present all the evidence. The judge will decide whether to freeze the trust and have the money returned to you. We'll probably also file a police report for fraud." "He's going to go to prison." "Probably." I could hear my father breathing on the other end of the line. "That's my son," he said. "Yes, and you raised him, and he's made his choices. Now he has to live with them." The trial started on November 3rd. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I was sitting at the table with Catherine, watching my brother arrive in a suit that was too big for him now. He'd lost weight, I realized. His face was thin and stressed, and the color of someone who understood that his entire life was about to change. The prosecution presented the case methodically. The emails, the recordings, the fake statements, the real statements, the forensic analysis, the expert testimony about how trust structures worked and how they were being abused. My brother's lawyer tried to characterize it as a family misunderstanding. A young man trying to be helpful who'd gotten in over his head with investments. A situation that could be resolved with a settlement and an apology. But then Catherine called me to testify. I walked to the stand and put my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The judge was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and the kind of face that had seen a lot of human beings try to lie under oath. Catherine walked me through it step by step. The dinner announcement, the emails my brother had sent to my mother, the phone call where he'd explained the trust structure to me, the forensic evidence that proved the money was being moved and hidden. And then his lawyer cross-examined me. He tried to make me seem like a disgruntled sibling jealous of my brother's success. He tried to suggest that I'd manipulated the evidence. He tried to frame this as a family dispute about money, not a criminal case about fraud. But I'd spent 3 months documenting this. I'd spent 3 months understanding every angle. I didn't get angry. I didn't get defensive. I just answered his questions calmly and logically, and every answer seemed to make things worse for my brother, not better. By the time I stepped down from the stand, my brother was gripping his lawyer's arm again, and he looked like he was going to be sick. The verdict came back after 3 days of jury deliberation. Guilty on all counts. The judge ordered the trust frozen and all assets returned to my parents. She also recommended that the case be referred to the federal prosecutor's office for criminal charges, which meant my brother was likely facing federal fraud charges on top of the civil judgment. As the gavel came down, my brother's face went blank. Not sad or angry or surprised, just blank, like the realization of what he'd done had finally caught up with him, and there was nothing left to feel. I expected to feel triumph. I expected to feel vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. I met my parents for coffee 3 days after the verdict. We sat in a small place in Ballard, the kind of neighborhood coffee shop that sells expensive lattes and has Wi-Fi and the kind of ambient noise that makes it hard to listen to what anyone else is saying, which was probably perfect for what we needed to talk about. My mother looked smaller than she had before. Like the knowledge of what she'd almost done, almost signed away her financial independence and her husband's retirement security, had physically diminished her. "Thank you," she said, "for not letting us be victimized twice, once by your brother and then by our own pride." I squeezed her hand. "I was scared," I said. "I was scared I was wrong and that if I went forward with this, I would destroy the family for nothing." "You were right," my father said. "And you had the courage to act on it even when you could have just accepted it and moved on." I couldn't accept it. I couldn't pretend that theft was a family matter that should stay private. My mother nodded. "Your brother called from jail," she said. "He wanted us to drop the criminal charges. He said it would be better for the family if we just resolved it civilly." "What did you say?" "That you were right, that he made his choices, that actions have consequences." I looked at my mother. This woman who had told me I was being dramatic, who had suggested that I was the problem, who had initially sided with my brother over her own instinct. "He's going to prison," I said. "Yes. Are you okay with that?" My mother was quiet for a very long time. "No," she said finally. "I will never be okay with that, but I'm also never going to pretend that he didn't do it. I'm never going to rewrite history to make myself feel better about raising a son who turned out to be a thief." She started crying, and my father put his arm around her, and I sat across from them and understood that the family I grew up in was genuinely dead. This one, the one where people told the truth instead of protecting each other's comfortable lies, was brand new, and I was going to have to learn how to exist in it. Marcus took a plea deal in January. He entered guilty pleas to wire fraud and bank fraud. He agreed to return the full amount of the misappropriated money and to pay restitution on top of that. In exchange, he received a sentence of 4 years in federal prison. I wasn't in the courtroom when he was sentenced. I didn't think I needed to be. I'd already seen him brought to account. I didn't need to watch the actual moment of punishment to know that justice had been served. Instead, I was at my office, working on a campaign for a tech client, when my lawyer Catherine called. "He's gone," she said. "He goes into federal prison next month. I wanted you to know." "How do you feel?" I asked her. "Like I've done my job. How do you feel?" I thought about that. "Tired," I said, "but also clean, like I can breathe again." "That's good. That's very good." After I hung up with Catherine, I sat at my desk and looked out the window at the Seattle skyline, and I thought about the person I'd been before all of this. The person who would have just accepted the dinner announcement and cried about it and accepted the narrative that I was too emotional, too unstable, too something. That person was gone. I wasn't angry anymore. That was the strange thing. I thought rage would fuel me through this, but it had been something else entirely. It had been clarity. It had been the ability to see clearly what had happened and the willingness to act on that clarity no matter how uncomfortable it made people. My parents called that night to tell me they were using some of the returned money to fund a scholarship in my name, not for business majors, but for women who were studying law. My father said he wanted to create opportunities for other women to have the kinds of tools to protect themselves and their families that I'd taught myself to use. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I know," I said. And I meant it. I was proud of me too. Epilogue. It's been 7 months since my brother entered federal prison. I'm sitting in my apartment, the same apartment where I stood that night after the family dinner and decided to understand what had happened, and I'm different in ways I didn't expect. I'm not angrier, I'm not more cynical, I'm just clearer about what I'm capable of, about what people will do when they think they can get away with it, about how important it is to trust your instincts instead of accepting other people's narratives about who you are. My parents' retirement is secure now. They're planning a trip to Italy this fall. My mother has started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of having been manipulated by her own child. My father has become almost aggressively interested in financial literacy, which is sweet in a way that also makes me a little bit sad, because he shouldn't have had to learn these lessons the hard way. Michael texted me yesterday asking if I wanted to get dinner. I said yes. I think we're going to be close, now that we're not competing for scraps from my parents. Now that the story isn't about who deserved what, but about how we all survived a betrayal and came out the other side. And sometimes, late at night, I think about my brother in federal prison and I don't feel anything. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just the recognition that he made choices and I made choices, and we both got what we deserved. He underestimated me. That's what he'll think about in those dark federal prison nights. He'll think about how his smart sister, the one he dismissed as emotional and unstable, had quietly gathered every piece of evidence she needed to bury him. He'll think about how he taught me everything I needed to know about deception simply by using it on me first. He'll have plenty of time to think about it. That's the real revenge, I think. Not the prison sentence or the financial restitution or the public exposure. It's knowing that someone who tried to diminish you discovered that you were far more formidable than they ever imagined. I gather my keys and my phone and head toward the door to meet my family for dinner. For the first time in months, I'm smiling.